Oh yeah, Republican Jesus comes packed with lead. That's no good.
He's packing heat because he's scared of everything. It's very sad.
Warning, this podcast contains violence, sexuality, gore, and other horrible and disturbing things. Listener discretion is advised. Also, the hosts of this venture are ignorant dipshits, so please do not take anything they say as fact. And enjoy the show.
Now, are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then we'll begin.
Today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be.
It is our basic human right to be fucked up.
A second plane now has crashed into the other tower of the World Trade Center.
Putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
The defendant shall be incarcerated for the rest of her natural life with no possibility of parole.
You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men.
We were somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold.
Occultae Veritatis.
Hello and welcome to a Christmas Occultae Veritatis special. I am Ood Gallifrey, and presenting this episode we have...
It's Miriam.
We're going to learn about the true meaning of Christmas today, but first we need some poison.
So, what's your poison?
Today's poison is a Delta 10 vape pen, which I might perhaps have vaped too much of. No regrets at all.
I laid all morning in my bed, catching up on emails and watching videos, and I was thirsty the whole time, but I didn't want to get up yet. But then I got up and I had this big bottle of room temperature tap water on my recording desk, and that's tasting like manna from heaven right now. So even though I'm smoking weed, I'm going to consider this wonderful bottle of tap water my poison.
Oh, you got to stay hydrated.
I was getting dried out, but this is tasting like magic water right now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Do the vape pens, do they come in strains, or is it just percentage of THC?
The one that I've got is indica and sativa. I buy mine from Delta Extracts, so you can get Delta 8, Delta 9 if it's legal where you are. So it's pretty amazing and also extremely overwhelming.
Let's talk some Christians and other people who stole from other cultures.
We've all heard the biblical origins of Christmas, but societies have been celebrating light and birth in the darkest days of winter centuries before Jesus walked the earth. Ancient Rome had its own December festivals. 1 week before the winter solstice, Romans began celebrating Saturnalia, an orgy of food and drink in honor of Saturn, the god of agriculture. Some Romans, particularly soldiers and government officials, also worshipped Mithra, the sun god. It is believed that to this small but powerful sect, the birthday of Mithra, December 25th, was the holiest day of the year. By the 1st century AD, pagan traditions were being challenged as Christianity took hold throughout the empire. But Christ's birth date remained a mystery, since the Bible doesn't mention exactly when he was born. Since pagan Rome already celebrated the birth of Mithra on December 25th, it is theorized the Church adopted the date as the birth of the Christ child. In the 4th century, the Church made it official, declaring December 25th as the feast day of the Nativity. The Church knew it could not outlaw the pagan traditions of Christmas, so it came to accept them. The evergreens traditionally brought indoors were decorated with apples, symbolizing the Garden of Eden. These apples would eventually become Christmas ornaments. 1,500 years later in America, a seminary professor named Clement Clark Moore reimagined the legend of St. Nicholas. In 1822, Moore wrote a poem called The Night Before Christmas, about a good-natured saint named Santa Claus, who was pulled by a group of reindeer and came down the chimney on Christmas Eve. Like St. Nicholas, Santa Claus spread good cheer and gave gifts to children. Less clear was exactly what this Santa Claus looked like. Then in 1863, Thomas Nast, a cartoonist for Harper's Weekly, settled the matter once and for all with his version of the Christmas Saint. Nast's Santa was rotund and jolly, with a full white beard and a sack full of toys. An American icon was born.
Congratulations to everyone who thought that Christmas was passed down from family to family, generation to generation, unbroken from early Christianity to today.
Oh yeah, I remember Nero in ancient Rome setting up a Christmas tree, putting presents underneath it.
Oh yeah, the First Council of Nicaea had up that Christmas tree. It was great.
Okay, first we're gonna ban these 4 books from the Bible, then we're gonna bring in Santa Claus for the kids.
All right, so today we're going to learn all about how Santa is real, probably, but Christmas definitely isn't.
Santa's definitely real. I see him at the mall all the time.
Look, I see Santa all the time. Have I seen God, though? Have I seen Jesus? No. Do they exist? Who knows? I am definitely not too high to read through my notes, which are wild, starting about midway through, but it's good. So Christmas has always been a time of family, feasting, gift giving, singing carols, putting up a Christmas tree, putting out the Yule log. People put tinsel on their trees. They gathered to sing about the beauty of the season, the birth of Christ. They opened gifts. They feasted on delicious turkey and other roasted meats. So, people have always done the traditions that we know today. And by always, I mean since maybe 1841 at the earliest, probably 1876. And that's because the Victorians loved tradition. And what they loved even more than tradition was cobbling things together to make things into a tradition and then pretending that it had always been done that way. And Christmas was no exception.
You see this in the Egyptian episode too, like our mummy eating episode.
Mm-hmm.
Like those Victorians in the 1700s and 1800s, not only did they physically colonize a bunch of places, they culturally colonized a bunch of places. They just went into a bunch of cultures and picked out parts they like and brought them back to England and cobbled them together into new holidays. It's weird as fuck.
It's pretty bizarre. Because prior to the Victorian era, Christmas was just a religious feast celebrated by the Christian Church, loosely based in old festival traditions of Saturnalia in Rome. And in Saturnalia, it was just a week-long Roman festival. They honored the god Saturn to celebrate the winter solstice and remember the golden ages of the Roman Empire. I think every culture has had a golden age that they're pining for. Saturnalia originated in the 5th century BCE, and even towards the 1st century BCE, the festival was known as the best of times. It was mostly held between December 17th and December 23rd, and it involves giving gifts to friends and giving your family gifts like candles, coins, food, practical gifts. People stopped wearing formal clothes, they played games, they enjoyed feasts, and they had role reversal parties where somebody would pretend to be the king, and then everyone else would mock him.
Is it one of those ha-ha, I'm gonna giggle along, but after this event is over, I'm gonna chop off your head kind of things? I guess it depends on the king, right?
It was like the group of friends would do that.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'd have a feast, and then you'd hide a bean or a coin in the pie or bread. And whoever got that bean, they played the king. And then everybody else at the dinner would mock them and mimic them. People were there to have fun and basically act like fools. It was laid back. It was the end of harvest season. Spring hadn't come yet. So you have your social restrictions at ease. People are gambling. They're appearing drunk in public. Good old-fashioned good times.
They spent all autumn digging up potatoes, and now they can finally eat them and make them into vodka and drink it,
Oh yeah, for real.
Saturn, although a fairly mysterious figure in Roman mythology, was the god of agriculture and had a fairly prominent temple in the Roman Forum. Saturnalia was a jolly and festive time which consisted of eating, drinking, games, partying and merrymaking for all. The the people's usual lives came to a halt, with businesses closing, people given holidays, and the informal, colourful clothing known as synthesis being worn, rather than the usual formal toga. The cult statue of Saturn had his ankles tied by woolen bonds throughout the year, but these were loosened during the Saturnalia. The act of loosening the bonds of the god Saturn caused the deity to be associated with liberation, which was a prominent aspect of the Saturnalia. The partying, drinking, and general merrymaking continued through day 2 of the Saturnalia, and on day 3 was the Feast of Opalia, a celebration of Ops, the wife of Saturn. Ops was an earth goddess and was the Roman deity of the harvest and fertility. The end of the Saturnalia was marked by the most important tradition of the festival, gift-giving. These were often small trinkets or jellied figs, but the most popular gifts were the small terracotta figures known as sigilla, which took the forms of deities, heroes like Hercules, or common and sometimes comical figures associated with the giver or the recipient. The influence of Saturnalia on the Christian celebration of Christmas was direct and includes the decoration of homes with garlands and lights, general merrymaking, feasting, and gift-giving.
Then you have Christianity growing from a little regional cult in the Judea area to a much larger religion that overtook the Roman Empire and beyond. And this festival transforms into what's known as Christ's Mass in the Catholic Church.
That period of history always fascinated me. Like, I imagine in our society, like, what if, I don't know, the president of America just decided a new religion was going to be the new nationwide thing? That would be such a strange event.
It would be absolutely bonkers. Medieval Christmas traditions were very regional, especially in England. So you had people in North England celebrating in one way, South England celebrating in another way, and they're very much focused on the religion aspects of the Christian tradition and Christmas. It was a 12-day celebration, so that's where the 12 days of Christmas come from. It starts on Christmas Eve and then lasts until Epiphany, when the 3 Magi come and visit Jesus. And Epiphany is also known as 12th night, because it's the last day of Christmas. They were still incorporating pagan traditions from Celtic Europe. The traditional Celtic garlands of holly, ivy, and mistletoe strung around the house as decoration. And mistletoe in particular was the most popular garland. So it was associated with protection against evil spirits and also fertility. So if kissing under the mistletoe sounds familiar, it's because it comes from the Celtic practice of couples kissing under the mistletoe and then plucking the white berries with each kiss to ensure fertility in the marriage.
Oh.
The Yule log, which is basically just an entire chunk of a tree trunk, was a very important feature of the Celtic winter festivals, and it was placed in the hearth and they kept it lit for all 12 days of the holiday.
I remember reading that a lot of those festivals were a lot darker than the jovial Christmas times, because it was literally like celebrating the passage of the hardest part of year. Like, it was literally like celebrating surviving the worst part of winter, you know?
Because the winter solstice is around December 21st. You typically have the longest night of the year. It's darkest for the longest. And so having the Yule log lit means that you have all that light in your house for those 12 days. It's being able to keep your house lit and being excited for the spring coming. So you know spring is going to come.
The word Yule really is our understanding of the word winter in Old Norse. After the winter solstice, the days get longer and longer and longer. And of course, 6 months later, you have the longest day. So the winter solstice is really sacred because it's celebrating the quiet of winter, but also the excitement of celebrating the sun. The celebration starts with the lighting of the Yule log, and it's a piece of oak that would have been carefully selected, and they may have carved images, for example, of the gods. And everybody would sit around, telling stories and feasting and sharing together. And then every morning they would, relight it again if it had gone out. And then for 12 days until the new year, basically, they would, continue the burning and the celebrating and the feasting. And then when the 12 days were over, they would save some of the log and use that for the next year. The core of that farmstead would be your immediate family. Most of the time, they were probably very busy working. And Yuletide would have been a celebration of the time away from that work. And so suddenly you have people from all over, all around the fire, young and old, telling stories and sharing from their lives. And I think we do that during our family Christmas celebrations too, because it's a time when we're catching up with each other. And it is just universal common behavior, isn't it?
Unlike Celtic holidays, though, Christmas celebrated the birth of Jesus Christ, who is more biblically and historically accurate to have been born in the spring when shepherds would actually have been tending flocks outside in their fields and baby animals would have been in the stables. But sure, it makes sense.
Yeah, it seems a little copy-paste, doesn't it?
Just copy-paste, but it's totally legit. And churches started adding nativity reenactments, and they eventually started growing into obscenely ridiculous theatrical displays, because if there's one thing Jesus loves, it's spectacle.
Oh, yeah.
Love of jazz hands unconfirmed, but definitely loved spectacle. It's somewhere in the Bible. So during this time, the gift-giving tradition was emphasized even more because you have the reference to the 3 gifts of the Magi, frankincense, gold, and myrrh. And contrary to popular belief, those would have been practical gifts because Joseph and Mary could have used the gold since they were poor, and they could have sold frankincense and myrrh because those were hot trading commodities back then. Therefore, they would have had more gold. So those were actually very practical gifts.
They kind of gave them some, some good investments.
Yeah, here's some gold and a trading commodity. Church attendance was also considered compulsory, so it would have completely replaced any pagan festival celebrations. So the compulsory church attendance combined with the appropriation of all of the pagan traditions made Christians the original colonizers. Christians would just colonize.
Yeah, pick apart the part they liked.
They'd take the parts they liked and beat you until you quit doing the parts they didn't like. As with Saturnalia, the gifts focused on practical items. So you'd have nice food, new clothes, firewood, maybe some little handmade toys for your children. Wealthy folks gave and received fine clothes and jewelry. Less well-off folks gave nicer foods, firewood, and simple toys to their children. And serfs, the bottom of society, were graciously allowed to give their lords extra bread and eggs, and sometimes a chicken or other livestock, just out of the goodness of their heart.
Oh, good. I'm sure it was super hard on those lords to accept those gifts.
Yeah, it was very difficult. They had to accept them as gifts and not money.
Oh, I see. Oh, they're giving them a break.
Yeah. How dare you give me a gift and not taxes? This is very rude of you, but I'll accept it because it's Christmas. The landed gentry did give gifts to some of their free staff. So these were people who were willingly working and not indentured servants. And they would give them a bonus of clothing or winter supplies. When you come to the Middle Ages, not much changed, but the holiday meal became a much more important part of the holiday. And you have some more pagan traditions creep back into the holiday, such as masked mummers performing traveling entertainment. And then the Lord of Misrule tradition came back as king of the feast. You have people having a party and they make a pie or another dish. They hide a bean in it, and whoever gets the bean is the king of the feast. And everybody else at the feast mimics the king and makes fun of them. And so that comes straight from Saturnalia.
December 25th as the date of Christmas first appeared in Rome, where the calendar stated that Christ was born 7 days before January 1st. Why was this date chosen? It fell exactly 9 months after March 25th, the date of Christ's conception. According to Christian theology, history was viewed as having perfect cycles. The world was created on March 25th. Christ died to renew the world on that date. December 25th was also chosen to compete with the pagan feast day Natalis Solis Invicti. The celebration of Christmas quickly spread to other Latin-speaking churches. What is the significance of Christmas? It was said to be a historical remembrance at first, but by the mid-5th century, the mystery of the Incarnation was also celebrated. There were 3 masses celebrated on Christmas: a mass during the day, a midnight mass, and a morning mass. In celebration of the holiday, incense was burned, festive vestments were worn, and many colors were used for the altar cloths. Festive music was also a part of the medieval celebration of Christmas, like Papal Laudes in memory of the crowning of Charlemagne on Christmas Day in 800. The tradition of carols supposedly originated with St. Francis, and was also a feature of the late medieval musical practice. The tradition of the Christmas tree was said to have begun with St. Boniface, after he cut down a sacred pagan oak in the 8th century. However, it has also been suggested that it was a custom started more likely for the dramatic reenactment of Adam and Eve, whose feast day was celebrated on the 24th of December. The tree was used as a stage prop to mimic the tree in paradise. It was decorated with apples and Eucharist wafers.
So once you get to the Elizabethan age, you get a shift in Advent, the pre-Christmas fast, starting on St. Andrew's Day on November 30th. That's transformed into a Christmas countdown to the 12-day holiday. So this is where the Advent season comes from. You know, Advent calendars, you get that little countdown where you have little chocolates or whatever, and there's 25 days of them. So that starts for us on December 1st, but the Advent season technically starts on November 30th on St. Andrew's feast day.
I never considered, like, where that tradition came from. It's just something that I never even thought about. It's just like a cardboard calendar full of chocolates, but of course it had to have an origin somewhere.
Before Queen Elizabeth I came in, it was a fast, like an actual religious fast. So you would start fasting in anticipation of your Christmas feast. The tradition now, we have Mardi Gras, which is Fat Tuesday, precedes your Lenten fast, and then you break your Lenten fast at Easter. So a lot of people don't know that that's where Mardi Gras comes from. It's a lot more than just people showing their boobs for beads in New Orleans.
Who fucking knew?
Yeah. You know, that's another holiday that comes from a French tradition that turned into a Christian tradition and then turned into an American tradition. Once we get from Elizabeth to the Protestant Reformation, they really did not like festivals and theatrics and anything else. So the Reformation had all of that reduced significantly. So all the fun parts of Christmas were taken away.
You can't be drunken in the streets except for this period of time that they put an end to that?
Yeah, for real. Everybody go to church. This is about Jesus. Jesus is the reason for the season. No fun is allowed. The Puritans wanted to outlaw Christmas just altogether. And, you know, they were wild religious extremists. But here in America, they were adorable pilgrims who made friends with the Indians. And that definitely did not turn out badly for the Indians.
Oh yeah, there definitely wasn't like totally on purpose genocide.
Yeah, no, pilgrims and Indians loved each other. That's how it worked.
Yeah.
Now we're at the Victorian Age, which is where the next big change to Christmas came from. The Victorians were obsessed with recapturing this elusive, mythical golden age. Even up to 200 years prior, writers were pining for a romanticized version of Christmas. And where other writers were just pining for that romanticism, the Victorians just really went hard and recreated what they thought those traditions were and just went whole hog. Just way out there. They even created new traditions. Our Christmas tree was imported by Prince Albert. Not the piercing, the person.
Oh.
He brought it over from his home country. He was a Saxe Goth from modern-day Belgium and Germany. Prince Albert imported his name and the Christmas trees from his home country. Caroling largely replaced traveling mummers, but you still saw them sometimes in the countryside. Since a lot of the traditions of English Christmas in particular were very widely regionalized and not cohesive at all, the Victorians had to just cobble all of this stuff together. So Santa Claus was born out of two things: the stories of St. Nicholas, which came from the Dutch, and Sinterklaas, who delivered gifts with reindeer in a sleigh.
Oh, they were two different things?
They are. They're two different things. So St. Nicholas is largely known in the Dutch areas because the Dutch gone over to England and set up their own little colonies there. Some of that was imported from those areas. So they had a small St. Nicholas tradition, and Sinterklaas was starting to be more popular, especially as trade became easier and more efficient. They're importing their winter traditions and they're merging those with our older English midwinter festival of the return of spring. And this is where Father Christmas comes from. It's an older man dressed in green, and he takes part in the celebration where they herald the coming of spring. So he's dressed in a green cloak, he's carrying whatever greenery they have around the house, and he's supposed to be the one who parades around and brings spring back.
That sounds druidic, too.
It really is. But his green cloak and garb turned into the red cloak and garb later.
Well, the story begins in the 4th century with a Turkish bishop called Nicholas. And he was the saint of sailors, so his cult spread all the way around through Europe. In England, we had Sir Christmas or Father Christmas. And he didn't really give presents. He wore a great big green bow. The beard seems to be there from the beginning. Saints in the Eastern Church often have beards, as Orthodox priests do today. And the Old English version of him tended to have a beard. He tended to be quite whiskery. For us now, he's associated with children. And that, of course, is very much the Santa Claus figure from the Netherlands and Germany and so on, which has united with our Father Christmas. Father Christmas is all about what we might call a threshold, a liminal space between believing and not believing. And there is something very beautiful about that. And I think children want to go on believing in elves. Again, something that really only comes in the 19th and early 20th century, this idea of the elves. Again, linked to, we don't know who makes our stuff anymore. It would be much nicer to think that it were elves working under really good conditions in Lapland with Father Christmas. The idea of leaving something for Father Christmas, a glass of sherry, a carrot for the reindeer, all goes back to this idea of gift economy, which was based on the idea that you didn't need money, somebody gave you a gift, you gave somebody else a gift. It was all about giving and receiving, and that's how society worked. And so you make your response to Father Christmas by giving him something back. And of course he enters the house down the chimney, which is very interesting because you might think of that as quite frightening. And for children in particular, the house is often an uncanny space, an eerie space, where they do believe that things might kind of come alive. But Father Christmas seems to be wholly benign. And of course there is this whole tradition of writing your letter for Father Christmas and putting it up the chimney, which I think is quite modern, but is very universal. The chimney then becomes the way in which you send things up and things come down. The Puritans in the 17th century, they tried to ban Christmas because it was seen as a sort of pagan festivity where people got drunk. It wasn't then linked to children at all. It was an adult festival with your friends, more necessarily than your family and children. And in fact, in the 17th century, there are all these slightly comic trials of Father Christmas. But he did survive, and of course the Puritan period ends in 1660 with the restoration of the monarchy, and back comes Father Christmas. Father Christmas is a way in which people invent culture all the time. And that's partly what's so wonderful about Father Christmas. He almost represents make-believe, the whole idea of imagination and creating family culture, family tradition, national tradition. I just wish that we made our Father Christmas customs slightly more public, slightly more charitable.
So the Industrial Revolution during the Victorian era also brings mass production. So this means you have cheaper toys, dolls, books, and other children's gifts that are now more acceptable to your rising middle class, which is mainly wealthy businessmen. And there are no wealthy businesswomen because women were still property back then.
Oh.
Yeah, you were the property of your father and then handed off to your husband. So it's not until women's suffrage that you really start seeing the independence of women. So no businesswomen, just wealthy businessmen.
Once certain classes start building capital and whatever currency they get, like, of course, society's going to come up with new things for that, like new middle class to spend their money on, and it sounds like this is just kind of a way to shoehorn that in. We have the mass production to make a lot of toys now, so now we can start to leech away some of the resources from a rising middle class.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Industrial Revolution is still largely happening in America and England and other parts of Western Europe. It's kind of like how the production areas and mass production is in East Asia, in China, Vietnam, and South Asia, where those people are poor people mass producing goods for wealthier countries to purchase. In the Industrial Revolution, you have poor people coming in from poorer areas like the country to work in the city, and they're mass producing these items for people much richer than they are to buy.
Sounds a lot like today. There's a lot of people overseas that are making products that they likely would never be able to afford themselves, for the West over here.
Yeah, absolutely. But poor kids, they still get to receive gifts. They're just frugal gifts. They get the practical gifts like apples, oranges, nuts, and they're often placed in another newly introduced tradition, the Christmas stocking.
Oh.
Another tradition that the Victorians appropriated. And I think that's another one that's part of the St. Nicholas tradition, because St. Nicholas, he flew around with his reindeer and his sleigh, and he would give gifts in a stocking. I think sometimes they were smaller things like fruits and nuts, and not, larger toys or anything like that. But the Victorians really took that, and you have your stockings hanging over the mantelpiece. Your Christmas trees are taking place of the mistletoe. You get toys and candies and all kinds of stuff in your Christmas stocking, unless you're poor. If you're poor, you're still getting the fruit and whatever tiny fruits your poor family can afford.
Sad things.
The Christmas stocking came out of the story of sisters who had hung their stockings, the ones they wear, to dry on the mantle overnight on Christmas Eve. And St. Nicholas came by with his reindeer. And because they were poor, they couldn't afford much food, and they certainly couldn't afford luxuries like oranges. St. Nicholas came by and, knowing they were poor, gave them oranges. And so in each stocking was an orange. And that's the origin of the Christmas stocking.
Yeah, because citrus fruits were still like a luxury back then.
They were a major luxury because you have to import citrus fruits from much warmer climates.
See, I'm lucky. I just have to go to the grocery store and they come in, there's a box of 30 of them and they're all wrapped in green paper. Back then you had to ship them on a wooden ship. Like, goddamn.
Any kind of orange I want from any kind of place at any time of year. So back then they were very seasonal. So if you had oranges in December, you must have been super rich. The other tradition that the Victorians sort of brought back, but also kind of invented, was Boxing Day, which we don't have in America.
We have it in Canada.
I know. All the colonies seem to have some version of Boxing Day when they celebrate Christmas, but we don't.
You guys down there, you have like Black Friday, which happens in November, and that's like the big sales day of the year, right?
Yeah, it's our favorite Christmas holiday.
That's what Boxing Day is for us, pretty much. It's just a big sales day for all the malls. it's pretty much an excuse for all the businesses to offload extra Christmas product at a discount. That's what Boxing Day has become.
Yeah. For the Victorians, it had turned into a way of servants and working people being given small box gifts, money, maybe a little Christmas bonus of money, maybe some fruit, something like that from their wealthier rich employers. Previous traditions in England, it was wealthier people giving leftovers from the Christmas feast. But now it's turned into a tradition where servants and working people are given money from their wealthier rich employers. It's the original Christmas bonus.
Oh, jeez. Never thought of it like that.
Yeah, but this was, the old boss makes $1, I make a dime. And then at Christmas, if I'm lucky, he'll give me a bonus of 1 whole penny.
Ooh.
Boxing Day is totally unfamiliar in America. We do not have this tradition. In Britain, Canada, and some of the other Christmas celebrating colonies, they're celebrating Boxing Day in various different ways. In Victorian England, you have the rise of the railway, and this allows all the country folk who move to the cities for work to go home for Christmas, to visit family, and they're given a little bonus from their employers, and then the servants in the country are given a little bit of a bonus from their employers as well. Also, with railways, you have a much cheaper postal system. So it is much cheaper to send Christmas cards and send letters to friends and family. You have the rise of Christmas cards.
They're seeming to get as many ways to get people to spend money as possible,
So 1840 was when the penny post was first introduced in Britain. And then in 1843, a printer by the name of Sir Henry Cole printed 1,000 cards for sale in his art shop in London. And he sold them for 1 shilling each. And they started selling. Because it was so cheap to send letters, people started selling these Christmas cards. And in 1870, the penny post was reduced to a halfpenny. So it was even cheaper. So now everyone is sending Christmas cards.
As the Victorian era went on, innovations in technology and printing meant that there was a real kind of high and low market. So there was some very cheap things being produced and bought for just a penny, and then some more expensive, more ornate designs. And that really encouraged people to go out and send them. So really, people across classes were able to access Christmas cards and send whichever ones were in their budget. Prior to the early 1800s, envelopes weren't really a thing, and that might be a bit of a surprise for some people watching this. Typically, they just folded letters, used a wax seal and sent them on to people.
Victorian Christmas cards contained a lot of the imagery that we think of today as traditional. So we have lots of images of robins, we have wintry scenes, lots of snow, we have ivy, mistletoe and holly. We also, of course, have Father Christmas. Father Christmas starts to appear on Victorian Christmas cards from about 1870, but his image isn't quite fixed yet. So sometimes we see him in his trademark red coat and hat and his long white beard. But in some of these other cards, you can see here, he's wearing brown robes. And here, particularly mischievous Santa is wearing a red hood and a green coat.
Looking at these in the 21st century, sometimes some of the humour and comments and slang doesn't really translate. So when this says, "May Christmas be just the cheese," I'm not quite sure what that's meant to be, but I expect it's supposed to mean, "May Christmas be great."
Children are one of the most popular themes in Victorian Christmas cards, symbolising the joy of the season, childlike innocence, and quite a lot of the portrayals are quite nostalgic, harking back to an earlier, maybe pre-industrialised time. They're often depicted doing wholesome activities like having a snowball fight, riding on a swing, or actually posting Christmas cards. We have this really interesting example here. It depicts a young girl selling holly, so showing the slightly darker side to Victorian childhood and the child poverty that existed at the time. It may have been a charity card, it may have been them signalling their sympathy with this issue. We also have images that tend towards the surreal, like these children's faces growing out of daisies. We have a wide variety of animals on the Christmas cards, and one of the Victorians' favourite things seemed to be to anthropomorphise them. So we have a family of robins dressed in their bonnet and hat and scarf. We've got kittens selling oranges at a market stall. Got these kittens running in a race, to be doing some acrobatics with their family. We have this dog dressed as a postman with disturbingly human-like hands. We have some rabbits playing a lovely game of ping pong. So we might not think of these animals as being very Christmassy today, but there was clearly a market for images of them.
The other major change that the Victorians made was the turkey. I know some people have ham on holidays. We never had turkey at my house because my dad is from Egypt and he hates turkey. It's mostly white meat, and white meat is inferior to dark meat. You can fight me on this. We had duck. Turkey replaced traditional meals of goose and roast beef if you were rich, or rabbit if you were poor, because it was so much cheaper to import turkeys and chickens and other fowl from America than it had been previously. Now you have steamships coming and much faster transportation. So what would have taken months and months to come over from America was now coming over in a matter of weeks. Some of the other things that came up in the Victorian area were the Christmas carols themselves. Previously, you had mummers doing a whole song and dance routine and a full entertainment for a little village or a homestead. And now you have Victorians actually going Christmas caroling. They will go house to house and sing Christmas carols that had started rising in popularity starting in 1843. So you have carols like "O Come All Ye Faithful," "Once in Royal David City," "See Him Amid the Winter Snow," "O Little Town of Bethlehem," "Away in a Manger." I mean, some of these are really still Christmas classics that you hear every year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All of those are Victorian. So none of those are ancient, traditional, medieval Christmas carols. Not one of them.
And to this day, the hair metal bands that remain do Christmas albums about them, you know?
Oh, I know. So why did the Victorians go so hard on creating these traditions? I mean, once you've heard a couple hundred years of people pining for a mythical golden age of Christmas, you really just want to start making a tradition. And because you had a lot more people becoming wealthy, it was much easier to make money and buy land in Britain and become your own landed gentry. You could make Christmas traditions. You could influence Christmas traditions. And because it was easier to spread news, you have newspapers, letters going out everywhere, you can make this cohesive and build one homogenized Christmas tradition.
The limits of technology and just the ability to like visit the next village over, it was limited in those old times. But as society developed, media started interconnecting, communication across a continent started becoming very easy. It's easy to see how it became from impossible to standardize to very easy.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, in the medieval era, if you have one region and they have their own little traditions, they have their mummers going from house to house to house, and maybe from one village to another village, a completely different region in another part of the country, it's going to be very difficult for people to travel regularly between those two regions. So you don't have the traditions overlapping like they do today. Like today, Japan has its own version of Christmas. I mean, that would have been unheard of 500 years ago. I mean, people were barely traveling to Japan 500 years ago. It's really amazing how once you start having improvements in technology, you start seeing increases in homogenization of traditions. In 1832, a full 44 years before Charles Dickens produces his vastly inferior version of A Christmas Carol, I mean, we all know The Muppet Christmas Carol with Michael Caine was the best, unbeatable Christmas Carol.
Yep, cosign. I'll cosign that.
Washington Irving, in my completely unbiased opinion, was probably the greatest American satirist, first real folklorist, and truly American writer, wrote 4 essays focused on the old Christmas holidays of England. So these essays are written in the voice of a sentimental traveler going around the English countryside, reveling in these so-called ancient traditions of Christmas in England. These essays popularized Christmas in America. One of the origin stories of Manhattan was a story about the shipwreck of a Dutch scouting party on Manhattan. And one of its members receives a vision in which, stop me if you've heard this name before, good old St. Nicholas came riding over the tops of the trees in that self-same wagon wherein he brings his yearly presents to children. And good old St. Nick tells the Dutch that they should settle on the island.
Oh, Santa told them to?
Santa is technically the founder of Manhattan.
That's the funniest possible origin story. I can't think of any other.
I know. It's great. And people just don't even know this. He has several essays that are written in the style of a gentleman traveling around England, romanticizing about these English Christmas traditions. And these are the Christmas tales. And you can buy them today as Tales of Old Christmas. I mean, people love this book.
Oh.
It's a way of romanticizing old Christmas. In 1832, he comes back from England. And in 1835, he founds the St. Nicholas Society of the city of New York and served as its secretary until 1841. And he also starts advancing Christmas as a festive pageant of presents and feasting, just really gassing it up as this amazing tradition that we really needed to celebrate in America, which was kind of a problem because previously Christmas had really been outlawed in a lot of parts of the country because of excessive drinking and fighting that had been spurred in the populace by this wild festival. People who had come over after the Puritans came over with their ideas of what Christmas was. It was a major feast. You ate, drank, you were merry. So eat, drink, and be merry. That's exactly what they were doing, was getting wasted and having a good time. He's really trying to bring it back. He's really reviving this holiday and saying, no, it's not about excessive drinking and fighting. It's about togetherness and feasting. And it's not just this indulgence, it's a spiritual necessity. You need it.
Oh, no.
Absolutely a spiritual necessity. You know, sure, you can have moments of strong excitement and selfish gratification, but, you know, really, this is about being joyful and rejoicing and, you know, the spirit of giving and togetherness and feasting. And I cannot with this version of Washington Irving. I mean, all of these goofy ass humanities professors are writing like this is a serious bit.
Do you think that like he swallowed the worm? Like he believed all that old shit just whole cloth?
I don't personally believe that he believed in all of it, but America really didn't have a lot of festivals and holiday traditions. We didn't have a literary tradition. We didn't have festival traditions. I mean, we had started wiping out indigenous traditions and trying to replace them with our own traditions, but people really didn't want to import British traditions because we had fought a whole war about being our own people. But we needed traditions. We needed holidays to celebrate. People didn't want to just go to church all the time and that being their only holiday, that being their only tradition. People really were looking for a fun tradition, a more joyful holiday. Like in ancient Rome, you had Saturnalia. In the Middle Ages, in the medieval period, you have these winter festival traditions where people are gathering together, they're feasting with family, and they have, like kissing under the mistletoe, and they have the Lord of Misrule and King of the Feast traditions. And a lot of those you have in Britain still, but we didn't have anything like that in America. So we were still making our own traditions and building out our own festivals and feast days. Reading Washington Irving's Christmas tales, it's an easy thing for people to latch onto.
I think we've all felt this in little parts, just in our personal lives. Like, if you've ever had a job where you have to be, like, professional, controlled, and measured, and tactful your entire shift because you're dealing with the public or important clients and all that, sometimes you get home and you just wanna be fucking goofy because you had to be professional for 12 hours in a row.
What better way to do that than at Christmas time? And in the 1800s is a prime time to do that, because now you have more people going to school and then having 2 weeks off at the end of December because there's no harvest, there's nothing to do. People don't want to be in school year round. And in the summertime, kids are leaving school to work on farms and work in planting season. In the fall, you've got harvest season. And then in the winter, there's really nothing to do. And America didn't really have any winter festivals. So what do? You bring in Christmas.
I mean, it sort of fit like a glove for what they were craving, right?
Yeah. So here comes Washington Irving with his Tales of Old Christmas. He does, though, introduce this as a holiday that brings all ranks in one warm, generous flow of joy and kindness. It's an appeal to the sentimental side of the holiday season. I mean, people are really appealed by this ability of Christmas to bring families together. And Christmas is almost like a deity in and of itself in this. It's not just a holiday. It's like you're worshiping Christmas almost. It's kindling not merely the fire of hospitality in the hall, but the genial flame of charity in the heart. Christmas is just so powerful. It's like, guy, take it down a couple of notches.
Yeah, he's kind of worshiping the nostalgia instead of the actual, like, point of the original holiday.
It's a whole way of life, and it's so superior because we don't have anything like it in America, which is true. We really don't. But he's going just so far in how he's describing it. I mean, I can see where, it would be so amazing. Everybody's brought together and it's amazing. All I can think about is holiday Christmas parties where, all the staff are awkwardly hanging out with their bosses, and then their bosses get up and they're like, let me give a speech about how good the company's doing before handing out this gift card,
And at the end of the Christmas party, he's like, I'm off to the Bahamas, guys. Thanks for working so hard.
I'm going to go hang out at my house where the pool house is bigger than any house you'll ever own.
I've had a tough day too, guys. My maid quit, so I'm right there with you.
Sorry, no Christmas bonuses this year. I crashed my Mercedes and had to buy a new one.
You know what? I'm willing to make the sacrifice that my boss can drive a Ford Focus if I can still have a Christmas bonus. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. But you can really see where, that idea of just gassing up Christmas as this amazing holiday, those seeds are planted by Washington Irving in the 1830s as this amazing holiday. I mean, a lot of that, though, is kind of broken up in the Christmas tales by things like his description of his stagecoach driver who is driving him around the countryside. And he's like, this guy is amazing. He's really the epitome of a perfect country villager. I mean, yeah, he's kind of, he's a drunkard. He was wasted the whole time he drove me around, but he was a man of numerous and important class of functionaries, and he was distinguished in dress and language and mannerism, so he couldn't be mistaken for anybody else.
Yeah, that's just part of the charm.
Yeah, that's just part of the charm. We had to make some stops along the way for his frequent conferences with the village housewives. Eventually, we made it to the squire's home and really get back into relishing the spirit of Christmas. One of the things he focuses on in the story about the stagecoachman is talking about his fellow passengers, and they're just complaining about it. They're like, God, we have to go visit our friends and our relatives and sit there and eat the Christmas dinner. I'm tired of this. This sucks. And it's not a fun description of people going home to Christmas. It's like, Christmas is amazing. It's great. I love it. Everyone loves Christmas. pay no attention to the stagecoach driver. He's great. He's special. He's wonderful. My fellow passengers seem to hate it, but guys, don't listen to them. It's part of the Christmas charm. It's, you know, a political association with the holiday. Let's go focus on the impending feast.
And forget about the stagecoach driver.
In the Christmas Eve tale, we switch to the voice of the squire's son. He's just so focused on this nostalgia and how great old Christmas was, and his son is just sitting there like, yeah, my dad just he's really into Christmas. I mean, it does not sound like he loves that his dad loves Christmas. I think that when you're a casual reader of these tales of old Christmas, you're focused on how amazing Christmas is. You're not focused on the story where you're watching this old guy literally recreate traditions the way he thinks they were. Just like the Victorians are sitting there recreating all of these traditions the way they think they were celebrated.
Yeah, it was just kind of like people going along with what he figured. Eh?
Yeah. You know, his son then says he lives a long way away from the main road. It's really lonely in this part of the country, and there's nobody there near him. He can do whatever he wants. He indulges in the bent of his own humor without molestation. So the squire loves Christmas, and he's really just gassing up Christmas and saying, Christmas is amazing, I love it. There's so much rich tradition and history, and it just seems like nobody is in the Christmas spirit. Everyone's sitting around going, yeah, God, I have to go have this feast with my relatives. You know, I have to go visit my aunts and uncles, and I have to go visit my friends, and it's such a chore, and the stagecoach driver is drunk on his malt liquor, and then you get to the country home, and this guy is only known as the squire. He doesn't even have a name. Father to son, since time immemorial, they're just the squire. And this guy is a historian, according to him. He's a historian. He knows everything there is to know about Christmas, and nobody's around to contradict him. None of the other gentry, none of the other peers can contradict him and say, hey, perhaps you might want to reconsider this. So instead of having like a real Christmas service or any kind of real traditional Christmas gathering, it's just him and his servants. And so brings together these long-standing, allegedly, Christmas traditions from the rural countryside. And he says, okay, first we will read the Christmas morning service, which was once, in the ancient past, almost universally the case at the seats of the nobility and gentry of England. Which, sure, that's legit. Then he has them sing a Christmas carol, which he constructed from a poem, which is another ancient custom, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure.
Then they have breakfast. The squire insists is true old English fare. They just go on and on about all of this magnificent tradition that they're engaging in that he's assured is based in ancient English tradition that's passed down father to son, mother to daughter, family to family, unbroken for hundreds and hundreds of years. This guy is just like making Christmas up as he goes along.
And you said this is where we get a lot of our ideas about Christmas, and it's just from some guy just figuring shit out and pulling it out of his ass and picking what he likes and rejecting what he doesn't like, eh?
It's funny, though. You know, we've developed all of these Christmas traditions. They're all based in this idea brought over by Washington Irving. You can see where a lot of these Victorian traditions are being built up and cobbled together kind of from all of these different ancient traditions, and they're cobbling together traditions from regional England, and there's a little bit of Saturnalia, there's a little bit of Middle Ages, and there's a little bit of medieval and Elizabethan, and they've mashed it all together into this Christmas tradition. And you can see Washington Irving kind of making fun of that, but Americans are reading this like, yeah, this is great. Okay, so Christmas morning service. traditional Christmas poem. Okay, got it. I read this when I was an undergrad, and I was just like, I cannot take this seriously. Christmas is fake. This is not real. Oh my God, this is the best.
We kind of took one fan fiction of Christmas and just made it the thing, eh?
Yeah. I mean, the Victorians had like, yeah, this is great. Let's put this together. And then Washington Irving is over here like, what if fan fiction, but making fun of it?
Many people are not fully aware of his importance today. Not only was he one of the most popular authors of all times in the United States, he also mentored an entire generation of American authors that came after him. Edgar Allan Poe, Walt Whitman, James Fenimore Cooper, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Emerson, Thoreau, Mark Twain. He started the entire literary tradition of the United States.
Now, it wouldn't be a very Merry Christmas without Irving. In a time when Christmas wasn't widely celebrated, Irving helped create the modern image of Santa Claus in A History of New York. He wrote about a man who dreamt that the good St. Nicholas came riding over the tops of the trees in that self-same wagon wherein he brings his yearly presents to children. He continued to foster the Christmas tradition in the sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, with stories like Christmas Eve, which describes the then little-known tradition of hanging mistletoe.
One of the curious elements in studying the life and legacy of Washington Irving is that he's not really known for his outstanding contribution to the celebration of American Christmas, and he is almost exclusively thought of as the progenitor of Halloween.
Irving's Christmas sketches proved wildly popular in both England and America, more popular than, say, Rip Van Winkle at the time, which were so influential that even now we remain indebted to them for much of the imagery that we associate with the traditional old-time Christmas: bountiful, festive, hearty, but always decorous, never transgressing the ultimate bounds of propriety, never sliding into vulgarity or rowdiness.
Most people don't realize that the Christmas that they know and love, the version of Christmas that they think of, was first popularized by Washington Irving. And in fact, that he wrote about an English Christmas, classic English Christmas, decades and decades before Charles Dickens ever did.
When it comes to Christmas, Washington Irving really invented the American Christmas.
It's funny, though, because you have this guy who's got his own ideas about Christmas, and he lives in his rural mansion. He's making it up as he goes along based on whatever he's read. And when he's like bringing the peasants in for Boxing Day, they're shuffling awkwardly about his Christmas poems and this Christmas morning sermon that he's trying to read. And they're like, God, can we get this over with? I have no idea what he's talking about. And then they go to church and the parson is like, here's my sermon and, yay, Christmas, whatever. I just want to get this over with. And the squire's like, no, it's about this. And we took that and we were like, yeah, all right.
Sign me up.
Yeah. But once we got past that, after the Victorians have started bringing all of this to us, now we're starting to adapt these. Santa Claus became Santa Claus. The green coat became Santa's red coat. People started really going whole hog. They just really started gassing up Christmas. They were like, this is amazing. This is so much fun. The Industrial Revolution gives people a little bit more free time. So if you're rich or if you're middle class, you can hang out on Christmas. You can give gifts. You can have a big feast. I mean, obviously, if you're poor, you're still working. It doesn't matter what day it is. But starting in 1850 in America, we start seeing Santa Claus, who's got the red suit, and he's bringing presents to people's homes. And through the years now, you've got Santa in a sleigh pulled by reindeer. All of that was cobbled together and invented by the Victorians. None of this is a real ancient tradition. I'm not mad about it because I'm going to let people believe what they want to believe. And if they're happy to have fun on Christmas and believe in Santa Claus and sing Christmas carols, and people pretending that these are ancient traditions is just ridiculous to me. I just can't deal with that. So Santa is real. Christmas is not. I'm sorry. Congratulations if this is your first time hearing that.
But you know what? Things that we just pulled out of our ass can still be enjoyable.
And people have a lot of fun with it. So if you believe in Santa Claus, if Santa visits your house every year, then I think it's fun. Part of the magic of Christmas. And now it's much less a religious thing and much more a social holiday. It's spread to other parts of the world. Like I was saying earlier, Japan has their own version of Christmas. It's more a winter holiday. They don't have Santa Claus or Jesus really that we have over here, but they have their own version of Christmas over there and transformed into a completely different holiday. It's great. I love it.
Now that the audience has found out that our modern idea of Christmas is just one guy's fan fiction, there's an opportunity in that. You can create your own fan fiction and celebrate Christmas how you like. Maybe your Christmas is you have to drink whiskey and strike a brass bell once an hour to keep away the demonic spirit of Santa. And you can't have Santa without the evil demons. There's some dark magic he has to use to control all those elves. They were a free people before he came. You can do whatever you want. The opportunity's open. If Washington Irving can just make shit up, so can you.
If Seinfeld can make up Festivus, a holiday for the rest of us, then you can make up your own tradition as well.
Fuck yeah.
And really, isn't that what we all want? Is just our own made-up traditions and our own made-up holidays? I would argue yes. So that's my episode. I'm sorry y'all had to find out the hard way that Christmas is fake, but I hope you are still enjoying your holidays.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Celebrate it however the fuck you want.
Hell yeah.
For Occultae Veritatis, I've been Gallifrey, and guest host.
This is Miriam.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Kwanzaa, all the rest. Fuck whatever traditions you're being forced to do whatever you want.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Okay, I love you, bye.
Playing us out this episode, Charles Vestal and his holiday song, Good Kid. Enjoy and see you in the after show.
What about?
Know
Alrighty, 3 quick prayers to Val to end off this 2022. From Heathen Mom. Oh, deliciously dangerous Val, I ask that you help me get to the point where, despite mental health issues, I will get a decent job. Thank you for your grace. A prayer from friend of the pod, Bambi. Dear Val, please grant me the courage to fuck around and the fortitude to find out. Val, let it be known, let it be granted. And for my very own radio demon, I'm going to try and read this, but there's a lot of consonants all in the row. I don't know if I'm summoning something or not. Valhalla Fahagen Udjar Tholotep Bigly Zatholth Sage Stoloth Leon Thoga Finigua Mignafa OVPOD Errol SASKATOON Wagnall Fahagan. Yeah, I think I sold our souls, technically, somewhere in the middle there, but, you know, a prayer's a prayer, so, Val, let it be known. Alrighty. See you in 2023, where we'll cover some more interesting bullshit. Ta-ta!